right now. We're starting that. The meeting is being recorded. For anybody who has any questions throughout the meeting, feel free to use that Q&A feature. It is in the bottom right-hand screen. So if you can, use that drop-down tab to send your questions to me, Stephanie Karpowitz, so I can be sure that I won't miss anything, and we'll do our best to get to all of them, as many as we can, for the end of the meeting. So after I stop sharing my screen here in a few minutes, everybody will be able to see the panelists in full screen mode, and feel free to jot down any questions that you have. And for anybody who wants to see this in grid view, there is a feature on the top right-hand side of your screen that you'll be able to see all of the panelists full screen. So with that, I will turn it over to Barb Short of Sanofi.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the end of the school week. It's Friday. I'm Barb Short with Sanofi's US CSR team, and it's my honor to introduce Catherine Malone of Junior Achievement of New Jersey. She and her team have earned national awards for growing, innovating, and strengthening junior achievement of New Jersey during her tenure as its president. And she's also a great leader and a relentless advocate for the students that she mentors and serves. So without further ado, let's welcome the very agile, creative, warm, and inspiring president of JANJ, Catherine Malone. Catherine?
Thank you, Barb, so much. I want to make sure everyone can hear me okay.
We can.
All right. I'd like to start by acknowledging that given all that's going on, programs like this that make education accessible to all people is so vitally important. And we represent equitable access to education and development, ensuring all youth have a voice and can truly reach their fullest potential. So with that said, I'd like to acknowledge our JA team, whose dedication to youth know no bounds, and especially Stephanie and Ashley and Brian, who've worked so hard on this event. As we've been pivoting and adapting to our new normal, Sanofi took a true leap of faith and became our first partner and panel of experts in this pilot series. Rebecca, Elaine, and Stefan, we thank you for saying yes without hesitation, and we thank you, Barb Short, for leading this exciting initiative. Sanofi employees have been outstanding mentors for our youth and have made possible innovative initiatives that include our Women's Future Leadership Forums and the launch of our Next Gen Tech Series. So we thank our truly remarkable champion, Christina Santos, Sanofi's Head of Diversity and Inclusion for North America, for serving as an active member of our board. With that, I'd like to introduce Diana Blankman-Roberts, Sanofi's Head of Corporate Social Responsibility here in the US. There are few corporate responsibility leaders who dedicate their entire careers to engaging companies in social good and to helping nonprofits like ours strengthen our impact through partnership, and Diana is most certainly one of them. So with that, I'll turn it over to Diana.
Catherine, that was very nice of you. Good morning, everybody. On behalf of Sanofi, I'm so delighted not only to be able to support this program, but support Junior Achievement of New Jersey as a whole. As a company that will only continue to thrive if we have a strong pipeline of talent, programs like this are really crucial. So thank you. So I'm thrilled to welcome, I think we have more than 130 teachers and students with us today, joining us from Irvington, Morris Hills, Madison, Pennsauken, Piscataway, Elizabeth, Newark, South River, Parsippany Troy Hills, East Brunswick, Jersey City, South Brunswick, Somerville, Raritan Valley Community College, Mullicle Hill, Freehold, Bridgewater, and Fairleigh Dickinson University. Wow. If I left anybody off or we don't have you, put your school name in the Q&A box so we make sure that we have you covered. And also a special thank you to the more than 30 students and Sanofi families we have joining us today as well. I think you guys can have some fun with your parents tonight in quizzing them on what you learned today. I also want to thank all of you for taking advantage of all of the programs that Junior Achievement has to offer. Our world needs your talent, not only in science, but certainly your commitment as a contributor to society, and junior achievement will help you along the way. So with that, thank you again and enjoy the program, and I'll turn it back to Catherine.
Thank you so much, Diana. And now it is such a privilege to introduce Kayla Wong, our student moderator, to join me. Kayla is a rising freshman at Rutgers University, studying computer science and data analytics. This past year, Kayla interned with JA and managed our Next Gen Tech Series events like our hackathons and our coding workshops, where she and her peers taught younger students topics relating to STEM, which is so remarkable, peers teaching to peers. As co-chair of our Student Leadership Committee, Kayla loves to spread STEM education to all young students, especially young women. So with that, take it away, Kayla.
Thank you so much, Catherine, and thank you to Sanofi. They are the reason why I am able to reach out and teach as many students as I am today, so thank you so much. We are so lucky to have three amazing panelists today, Rebecca, Elaine, and Stefan with us. And can we just start off by giving a brief introduction, your name, title, company, and brief job description?
Sure, I can go ahead and go first. So this is Rebecca Sendak, and thank you everybody for tuning in. So I'm the head of research and development for Sanofi for North America. And so essentially we do all of the work leading to the medicines that we are able to manufacture and provide to patients as a company.
Okay, I think, Stefan, is it okay if I go next?
Absolutely, please.
You're not going to argue with me. Okay. Good morning, everybody. My name is Elaine O'Hara, and I head up commercial operations for North America for Sanofi Pasteur. So most of what we do is really facilitating the provision of vaccines, if you will, to healthcare practitioners across the country from a sales and marketing perspective, but also working in tandem, as you'll hear from Stefan, also in terms of the pure physical logistics of getting vaccine across the country as well. So delighted to be here today and looking forward to our discussion and presentation. So thank you.
And good morning, everybody. My name is Stefan Rohr. I'm head of logistics and supply chain for North America. We basically really take all the amazing work that is done by Rebecca and Elaine, and we are responsible for distributing over 300 million units to all of our patients and customers across the country and the region, providing our patients with medicines that obviously they need in times like this, but throughout the year as well. So very glad to be here. Thank you, and hope it's informative for all of you.
Thank you. So Rebecca, Sanofi is a global pharmaceutical company. What do your employees do every single day?
That's a great question. So we are a very large company. I think we're about 100,000 people worldwide at this point. And the overall goal of our company is to bring medicines to patients. And when you actually look at what we do as a company, it's pretty diverse. It goes everywhere from the R&D side, where we're obviously working on trying to find targets for different diseases and figure out how we can cure cancer. And, you know, there's that sort of innovative R&D side of the company, but as Elaine and Stefan mentioned, there's a whole part of the company that's so critical to, once we get a medicine that's been approved by the government, to you know, to be a sellable product. There's a whole aspect around making sure we can deliver that to the patients. And so there's people who work in regulatory and quality assurance and distribution and manufacturing. So it's a wide variety of jobs to kind of get from that early concept of what could be a drug all the way through to being able to deliver that to patients.
It's awesome seeing how all those different parts of the company all come together and, you know, create one big company. That's awesome. So Stefan and Rebecca, you both help run Sanofi's business and are on the COVID-19 crisis team. What has changed at Sanofi when COVID-19 became a threat, and what did you have to do immediately?
Kayla, thank you, and I'll jump in and then give Rebecca a shot. I think that, you know, when COVID first happened, I think that what we had to do is we really had to figure out how to work as a team. You know, like Rebecca mentioned, and I think it's really important, we're 100,000 employees. And in the US, you know, we tried to put together very effectively a crisis committee right away that brought together the top 25, 28 leaders of the business. And a lot of us work in areas where, you know, we don't interact every day. So I had the pleasure of meeting Rebecca. I've worked with Elaine. I've worked with a number of the other leaders. But we basically had meetings every day to figure out ultimately how do we make sure that we continue to provide much needed medicines to our patients and our customers. We had to figure out how to accept, or in addition to running our normal day-to-day business, how do we function as a team? How do we get everybody together? How do we start moving forward on one guiding principle, and that is to empower life for all of our patients and all of our customers. So it was really putting aside all the differences that we had. It was, you know, putting aside all of our own things that we had to focus on, and that was a priority to us. And we had to really think of a priority as a team and how to make sure that Sanofi continues to operate so that we could really help our patients.
Thanks, Stefan. Yeah, and I would only add, one of the other challenges we had to immediately deal with is, you know, what are those critical activities that we have to keep going? You know, if patients are waiting for their infusion and they're getting it every two weeks and they're expecting to show up to the doctors to get it, how do we make sure they're still getting that infusion? Or if we have clinical studies ongoing, you know, how do we make sure that the drug supply is still going to make it there? We also, you know, as with any other company, do animal research in a very responsible way, but, you know, how do you make sure that that continues and you don't jeopardize the lives of the animals? So there was a lot of focus on just what are those near-term activities that we have to really keep going, and what are the things we can sort of either do from home or potentially could back burner for a brief period and come back to later.
Wow. Well, thank you for your commitment to the community. We certainly all appreciate it. Elaine, so what are the most important ways that you and your coworkers have been fighting against COVID-19?
Thanks, Kayla. Yeah, it's been a very interesting, sort of serious time for all of us. I think picking up on what Stefan and Rebecca said, the company is actually organized across what we call business units. We have a business unit that focuses predominantly oncology and multiple sclerosis and rare disease. We also have a business unit that focuses on more general sort of diseases like diabetes and cardiovascular diseases. And then I represent vaccines. So to Rebecca's point, we've been really hyper-focused on how can we facilitate the provision of the medicines that we make to patients who really need it. In some cases, obviously, they're really dealing with life-threatening situations. Going into a shutdown situation, you know, all of a sudden, not everybody has access to medication. To Rebecca's point, how do I get to an oncologist's office to get my infusion? So what we were really super focused on right from the beginning was working with our physicians, our healthcare practitioners, to understand what were the critical needs that they had, and then also as them being a conduit for their patients, what needs did their patients have as well. So I have to say that was really our immediate focus. As it relates specifically to vaccines, what happened as a result of going into and having the sort of the health crisis as it related to COVID-19, you know, everything shut down in the US. So unfortunately, that became the crisis, that became the hyper focus. And really, as it relates to vaccines, nobody was going to get their vaccinations. Okay. So, you know, moms that had young babies, you know, were saying, I can't go to the pediatrician's office now because, you know, there's a health crisis out there. So just specifically, what we did is we really worked with our pediatric offices, with our primary care offices, to try to understand what is it that you need to try to get your patients and their babies or whomever to come back into your office to get vaccinated, because vaccination is incredibly important to make sure that we don't have outbreaks of things like measles, mumps, rubella, chickenpox, influenza, which is coming up. So that is actually what we have been working on over the last several months as offices have come back into sort of returning back to normal, bringing their patients back in to help to create clinics and setups where it's okay to call your patients, tell them I've sort of rearranged my office. I have input coming in one door and out the other door, and I've put safety mechanisms in place to be able to help prevent anybody that's in my customer base, in my patient base, getting a COVID-19 infection. Because really, and I hate to sort of be a little pessimistic, you know, the worst thing that could happen is that we see outbreaks of vaccine preventable diseases that occur simultaneously while we're having a health crisis with COVID-19. So that's really been our primary focus over the last several weeks, and you know, it's an ongoing working relationship with all of our healthcare practitioners and doctors to be able to help that transpire.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that you're really understanding doctors and patients. I think that that's such a crucial step to really combating this crisis and like helping the community in general. So Stefan, how did COVID-19 affect your day-to-day business? What did you have to do to still get all of the medicines to the doctors and patients who still need them?
You know, Kayla, I think that's a great question, and I think Elaine stole a lot of my thunder. You know, when all of this started, you know, our biggest concerns when we listened to the doctors and when we listened to all of our medical professionals, one of the things that became very apparent is that this was a very fast spreading, a very contagious type of disease. And we knew that patients, as Elaine mentioned, patients and doctors needed our medicine. We had to make sure that despite COVID, despite the fear, despite the concern, we had to have people in our distribution centers that had to go to work every day. These are people just like you and me that were concerned for their families, they were concerned for their children, but we relied on these people to go in and do our packaging. You have to remember that across North America, we move over 2.5 million shipments a year of medicines to hospitals, to distributors, to wholesalers, so that when you go to CVS or your doctor, you can actually get those medicines. So we had to ensure right from the first minute that we said, uh-oh, there's something coming and it could be very impactful to society, we had to make sure that we provided an environment for our employees to be able to come to work every day, to carry on the things that they had to do in order to get these boxes and these medicines out the door. We had to make sure how to keep them safe. We worked with incredibly talented people in HSE and in our OSHA and in our medical teams to say, what do we do about gowning? What do we do about face masks? What do we do about gloves? How do we make sure that every day when these people came to our distribution centers to manage, to pack, and to handle the product, that they were in fact being safe, not only for themselves, but also for the people around them. We wanted to make sure, and it's vital, to Rebecca's team in R&D and also Elaine with the production teams, we wanted to make sure that our employees came in every day, were able to do their jobs, but then could go home safely to their family because their spouses, their children were hearing all these things on the news that, you know, you could pick this disease, you could pick this pandemic up and then bring it home and infect your family. So we had to almost try to guarantee people were safe, people could still be moving in order to do their jobs. And at the end of the day, we could still facilitate getting all of those critical vaccines, rare disease products, general medicines, over-the-counter medicines. We had to make sure we got those back to the patients and to the shelves. So it was really looking at what do we do to try to ensure that as much as possible. But we knew that at the end of the day, regardless of what was happening, regardless of this pandemic, we had to make sure there was continuity to our business to get our medicines out the door.
That's awesome, and we really do appreciate all of our frontline workers. I just want to remind the audience right now, you must have so many questions after hearing what all of our industry professionals have been talking about. So I encourage you guys, use the Q&A box that Stephanie was talking about, send her a question, and we're going to do our best to answer all of them. So Elaine, I'm a student and I've been researching and I've been hearing mixed messages from companies all across the world about when we will have a COVID-19 vaccine. So could you just tell us a little bit, when will we have a vaccine and what are the steps to finding one that works? Does life suddenly just go back to normal once one company has one?
So if I had the answer to that, I probably wouldn't be here today, but it's a great question and I just want to put it into perspective. So historically, it takes about 10 years to bring a vaccine to market. The reason it takes so long is because you're putting basically a vaccine is really technically used to prevent an infection from occurring. What it does is you get vaccinated, it sort of stimulates a very low-key immune response. Rebecca's probably laughing at me in terms of how I'm trying to describe this because she's the scientist and I'm not. But And so therefore what happens is when the wild virus, or let's say a bacterial infection, is circulating or enters your body, because you have already been primed to launch an immune response, you can therefore appropriately fight off the infection, right? Now, the reason why it takes so long typically is because you really have to go through several phases of testing. We typically call it phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. And again, you're putting a vaccine into basically a healthy group of individuals. You want to understand, can they appropriately launch an immune response? And more importantly, and as importantly, is the vaccine safe? With respect to COVID-19, we're in unprecedented times. And I know everybody has heard that word so many times, but it truly is very unusual, remarkable, but also very serious. What we're attempting to do globally is bring a vaccine to market and basically test it through the various phases that typically take 10 years in what really is a very short space of time, less than a year. So there are multiple companies that are working on COVID-19 vaccines. They have different technological platforms. I won't go into all of that. I think that the question really becomes, what candidate will be successful? If we just look at probability of success historically, not all vaccines come to market, either because there was a safety signal or because they just didn't prove themselves to be efficacious. So it is actually super important that we have many candidates in testing phases at this point in time. Many companies you may have seen are going to actually work with large-scale manufacturers as well, so that they can, at risk, produce the vaccine while it's actually being tested. To be honest, the goal is to try to get a vaccine out into the marketplace that is proven to be safe and effective, probably by the beginning of next year. I think some of you may have seen some statements made by Dr. Anthony Fauci. There are a few candidates that are certainly based within the US that seem to have a lot of promise. So having said that, I think that's the goal. It's certainly the goal from a government perspective. There are other vaccines that are being tested in other countries as well. We know of some candidates in China. So all of this, at the end of the day, we will actually really need, I think, as many candidates as possible to be safe and effective and licensed, because we have a very large global population that will need a vaccine. I think we know from all of the modeling that COVID-19 is probably not going to go away anytime soon. And until there is either a treatment or a vaccine intervention, these become incredibly important tools to basically fight this disease.
Awesome. And Elaine and Stefan, how has your company partnered with other companies during this pandemic to make a bigger and faster difference?
I guess I can jump in, Kayla. Thank you. I know that Elaine from the commercial side, as she said with vaccines, she'll probably comment, what we're doing with other companies. But from my side, I've had the amazing opportunity to work with our governmental affairs group, and it's amazing to see. You hear about a lot of these pharmaceutical companies that are doing different things, and we're trying to do them in tandem, and we're trying to work together. But what I'm seeing is that there's also a lot of interaction with the government. We're working with the Senate Armed Services Committee. We're looking for, what do we do with regards to the capacity? Because once Elaine and other commercial people start getting a vaccine together that's, funded and driven by Rebecca and our amazing scientists, we're going to have to figure out a way, how are we going to immunize hundreds of millions of people, not only in the US, but globally? So it's amazing to see the participation led by government organizations like pharma and other, industry associations to say, what capacity do we have? If we had to produce 1, 2, 3 billion, inoculations to help people around the world, how do we do this? No one company is going to be able to do this. We simply don't have the capacity, because we're producing medicines that we need today. You're looking at introducing an entire new vaccine that we then have to produce on a mass scale. So there's a lot of activity that are led by the Gates Foundation and other incredible groups to say, what can we do together? Forget about all the barriers between Pfizer and Sanofi and Johnson & Johnson and all these other companies. How do we work together to pool our resources, to pool our talent, so that when amazing people make this discovery and we can bring it to the market, how do we distribute it? How do we package it? How do we get it out to the masses in the shortest amount of time? And it's amazing to see that work and how we can really come together as one group instead of individual companies. Elaine, I don't know if you'd like to add from the company side.
Not much to add. I think you characterized a lot of this, Stefan. Just to say, it is very unprecedented times. What we've seen in the last several months is just amazing partnerships within the industry between smaller, sort of very small biotech slash departments of health, like small little companies who know that they have to partner with some larger companies like Sanofi, for example, just to make the vaccine a reality, right? The other piece that we've seen, which was sort of somewhat unprecedented, was the partnership between Sanofi Pasteur and, for example, GlaxoSmithKline. GlaxoSmithKline actually have a technology called an adjuvant. Sanofi Pasteur has a technology which we're putting into the clinic, which is our recombinant technology, which is what we're trying to build for COVID-19. The thought process is to take the Sanofi Pasteur technology, which is a recombinant vaccine, and GSK's adjuvant, which an adjuvant actually boosts the vaccine efficacy. So marrying those two together is just a really interesting example of two companies coming together, which typically we're competitors. So again, really unprecedented things happening globally regarding, forget your competition, forget if you're a small guy versus a big guy. Let's really just come together and try to, in the name of public health, bring a vaccine to market as quickly as possible. And that's really the goal here.
I love that you're saying that, because it's so refreshing to see just companies and people overall just coming together for the greater good and for the community. And I think that's just so amazing to see. So to everyone, this has been hard. Everything that we love to do is on pause. Personally, school, sports, arts performances, college visits, all of our social lives, they're all put on hold. And as you all mentioned, we have family on the front line, family working from home, and they're at high risk. So how do you and your family manage it all? And what advice would you give young people ready to take on the world, especially since the state loosens their restrictions?
Sure, I can go ahead and start, Kayla. So I think the way we're managing it's I think in this day and age, there's a lot of ability to connect with technology. And I have to say, I've got a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old as my children. And I think that generation is just one of the most connected, or probably the most connected generations that we've had. And I think that's actually helped us quite a bit. I actually had to go right before this and go into my son's room and tell him to make sure he didn't play any video games while I was trying to do this because I didn't want him to disrupt my my bandwidth. And I have to go in and tell him to be quiet because he and his friends are playing with each other. And so I think it's wonderful. Like I actually think my kids are surviving this very well. My daughter joined Scouts, Boy Scouts actually this year, because the Boy Scouts opened up to girls this year, and she actually did a virtual camp out in the backyard. So I think it's great to see people working around, this holding them up, and I encourage everybody to just think outside the box and be as flexible as you can. In terms of advice, I mean, one thing I would say is the age of probably a lot of the people tuned in today is when I was your age, we actually had a similar and different virus. So HIV, AIDS was what came about in the 80s when I was your age. And it was really interesting, like it's transmitted differently and a lot of different characteristics, but there's a lot of similarities that I'm noticing in terms of politics kind of got in the way of getting a treatment, and there were hemophilia patients who didn't end up with a treatment for a long time or prevention or understanding of the disease because of politics. And so my advice, I think, for the folks on the phone is really challenge the facts that you're hearing, and if you hear something, seek to understand more, look at different sources of information, and things will change. I mean, you're seeing, they said at first that masks weren't effective, and then they came back and said, yes, wear masks, and now they're talking about masks again. And the scientific understanding evolves, and it's to be expected, but, seek out that information and be an advocate for your own understanding. That would be my advice.
I think one of the things that makes my job as wonderful as it is I get to follow these ladies because these are incredibly talented, incredibly smart ladies, and I really don't have much to add. I think that, my wife and I, we enjoy trying to be outside a little bit, so we try to get out. And I think one of the things is I've learned from Christina, another woman I greatly admire that's on this, telecast, is that, it's about mental health. It's about, being able to ground yourself. It's being able to go through each day and finding that one or two different things that really gives you pleasure, that really lets you connect to what's happening around us. I think my wife and I, we see, as everybody does, we see so many things on TV, and you hear all these news reports and you hear all these discussions about a lot of crises that are going on, not only in the US, but worldwide. And the advice I have is that you need to take a step back and you really need to look at what's important. Focus on your family, focus on your friends, especially with the younger generation today. You've got so many abilities to connect on, as Rebecca was saying, with Zoom and chat and Twitter. And my daughter, I have a 22-year-old daughter that's in Brazil, and she laughs at me because it wasn't until about a year ago that she actually got me a Facebook account, because I never really got into Facebook and everything else. And she said, look at all the cool things you can do. And I try to stay off of it, but I can, I see myself looking at that. But there's so many things you can do to connect. The other thing that she's responsible for is that she ended up convincing my wife and I to get a PlayStation. And so we actually can go and do, challenge matches on PlayStation. And she basically, kicks our butt all over the place. But, it's a way to connect. And you've got to find that thing when you hear all these things going on in the world, and you hear all these reports, and you hear all these negative things. You need to step back. You need to focus on family. You need to focus on what makes life so amazing. And keep in mind, as Elaine said, with finding, the cures and everything else, we know that we're going to be hearing about COVID and all the restrictions for months to come. This isn't going anywhere. And I think the biggest advice is that, as I love the quote, this is not a sprint, it's a marathon. You have to be prepared with your family, with your parents, with your kids. You have to be prepared of finding new things every day, find new things on the weekend. Get ready to manage this step by step, and don't look for quick solutions. It's simply not going to happen. And we have to focus on what's good, and we have to prepare for the long term. This will pass. Life will get back to normal, but we have to manage it day by day. And with that, I'll give it to Elaine.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting you said that. I agree. Sorry about the echo. It's a tough time for everybody. Similar to Rebecca, I have two children. I have an 18-year-old son and a 16-year-old daughter. I think we have good days and bad days. Some days I have good days and they have bad days, and sometimes they're having the good days, and we all have our own sort of ups and downs. It's a tough roller coaster ride. The only thing I would just say is, breathe, take your time going through this. You absolutely will get through it. We're all very, very resilient. You are the next generation, and I think it's super important to observe what's going on and to learn from it. And to just be, I know, not disheartened by what you see and hear, because some of what's happening is very, very disheartening. It is very troubling. But there will always be light at the end of the tunnel. We just don't know what that looks like yet a little bit. And so have patience, go easy on yourself. I know it's got to be so hard if you're in either middle school or you're in high school. Graduations aren't happening, classes are online. It's just, I see my daughter Rose, and as I say, some days she has great days, and others she's like throwing her hands up in the air saying, I don't know how to deal with this. This is just tough. So as I say, go easy on yourself. We're in a bit of what some of my friends have called the great pause, because things have been sort of put on pause, but we will absolutely come to a different reality when we get out of this, and we will have learned a tremendous amount. And again, you are the next generation, so it is super important that that you sort of collectively see what has happened, and just how we can all really work together to just come out of this and continue to be very strong and very resilient, and continue to evolve our space to be a better place. Whether you have influence that in New Jersey, in Pennsylvania, in another country, in your own family, that's just my kind of meandering 2 cents worth. But hang in there, all right? Because I know that we'll get out of this, and it'll be a little bit different, but the journey will have taught us a tremendous amount.
Thank you so much. That was all really inspirational advice. I think that all young people really need to hear. This is just a general question for students on the line for all of our panelists. Thinking about students listening in today, what would you tell your younger self?
I think, I think from my side, if I had the chance to give advice is that never accept the status quo. You have every right to ask questions, to find out for yourself what makes sense. As you're growing up and as you're learning and as you're being taught, you're being given a lot of information. You should challenge that information. Do it in the right way. Do it with respect. Always respect how you're presenting and how you're asking the questions. But never be afraid to ask questions. Never be afraid to learn additional things. Don't take things at face value. Step outside and say, does this make sense to me, and do I believe it, and how can I use this? You've got an amazing ability going forward, because right now we're asking a lot of questions. I find myself, I'm still learning. I'm obviously, pretty much older, but I want to keep learning. I want to keep understanding, why is this being said? Who's saying this? What does this make sense to me? And if not, there's right ways and wrong ways to go about getting that answer. And I believe that everybody has the right to find out for themselves how they use that information and what it means to them. Never stop learning, never stop exploring, and never stop searching for the truth. That's my single advice that I can give.
Thanks, Stefan. I would also add to that, and I know this is supposed to be about COVID today, but I think what's probably on a lot of folks' minds too are just some of the stuff that's going on in terms of some of the racial happenings in the country. And as you were speaking, Stefan, I think some of what you were saying kind of echoed into that for me. Is it's like, never accept the status quo, embrace diversity. I think being in R&D, I think one of the benefits I've had in my life is I grew up in a very white state. I grew up in Vermont, which has 98% white population. And then I had the fortunate future of kind of moving into science. And in many places where I've been the minority, and the diversity has been wonderful. And the different perspectives and the different ways of looking at things. And so that would be my piece to sort of add on to what Stefan was saying, is that doesn't just fit in the COVID situation, but just across the board, you guys have the ability to shape the future and how we behave and what we accept as normal. And I would encourage you to really challenge that status quo.
Thanks, Rebecca. Mine will be a little bit more cryptic if I was to tell my younger self, to provide some guidance. It might be along the lines of, there's a book that's written by a gentleman called John Muff, and it's called The 3 Questions. And he has 3 questions. It's almost like a children's cartoon, but they're very, very profound. And the first one is what is the right thing to do? That's the first question. The second question is, when is the right time to do it? And the third question is, who is the most important one? And I think in my younger days, I used to sort of, if I just to mull around some of those. Today, the answers for me are a little bit more obvious. The right time to do the right thing is now. Who is the most important one? It's the person that you're with at the time. And, I think you really have to believe in those things. Life goes by pretty quickly. So doing the right thing at the right time is really incredibly important. You'll know it. And the most important people are the people that are with you on your daily journey through life. And it's just, if you live by those principles, I think you'll have hopefully satisfaction in life, and then also happiness as well. So. 2 cents.
Yes, for sure. Thank you so much. And I know, audience, you have asked so many questions, so I'm going to hand it off to Stephanie, who is going to help answer some of them.
All right, can everybody hear me? Excellent. Thank you so much for all of that. We have some great questions that are coming in the chat box, and in the interest of time, I might try and combine a few. So I do want to ask, I'm going to send this over to Rebecca as our scientist R&D participant here. We want to know, how has your company seen an increase in demand for, and please forgive me, hydroxychloroquine, and has that been determined that it's been effective against COVID-19? And we just wanted to kind of see what your aspect is from your perspective as a scientist in the middle of all of this.
Sure. I mean, I think Stefan's probably more equipped to answer what our demand, and we discussed this actually a lot in the crisis team, and there's a few medicines that we keep an eye on. When they come up in the news, it becomes a clear question. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Stefan, I don't think we've had problems supplying the people who need it for the prescribed indications, right?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Rebecca. When we first started and there was a lot of interest on a global basis, we made sure that we doubled our production on the hydroxychloroquine, and we made sure that we also donated over 100 million tablets to numerous countries around the world for what was considered at the time very imperative clinical trials to see the validity. So we had absolutely no problems managing production. We enhanced production, and we're keeping pace with the requirements as we know it today.
Great, thanks, Stefan. Yeah, and from the scientific perspective, I mean, I would have to say I think the jury is still out. Again, this got a lot of publicity early on, and I think there was a lot of, you know, there's definite reasons to believe that this could have, you know, have some effectiveness, but there are side effects to the drug, and I think people have seen in the news that there was a report that came out very recently, I think last week, saying that it was actually detrimental to give the drug, and that there's all these, you know, the side effects actually outweighed the benefits. And now there's another report this week questioning that report and saying, you know, the data seems almost too complete, and how could they have recreated this data set? So again, I think this is a little bit of a political one where we have to let the science dictate, much like Elaine said earlier about the vaccines. Unfortunately, like scientific and clinical research it's not a super fast process, because again, you have to go through each of those steps to know. And I still think there's a chance that there could be some benefit there, but I think we have to wait for sort of those rigorous studies to provide the data.
Thank you so much. And just as a follow-up to that, could you just share what is it that, and I'm going to say it again, hydroxychloroquine, what is that prescribed for outside of COVID?
I believe it's prescribed for lupus, and I don't know, Elaine and Stefan, if you can help me out with that one. I think it's
for malaria.
For malaria, it's typically prescribed for a malaria infection, which obviously is the vector is usually a mosquito, so it's a mosquito-borne infection, and it has been used in the past for that. But I think it's also actually can be used often in conjunction with other medicines, actually for the treatment of multiple sclerosis as well, if I'm not mistaken. So it has some
RA.
Yeah. Sorry, rheumatoid. You're right. It's rheumatoid arthritis.
Yeah.
Apologies. Yes, for RA. Yep.
Fantastic. So we have a question from Keenan, who wants to know, how has your approach to creating a vaccine for COVID-19 changed? And what about the virus and this situation surrounding the virus has changed your approach?
So yeah, I think as I was saying earlier, you know, really what we're trying to do is take what's typically a 10-year time frame and consolidate that down into what's probably just maybe a little over a year. And the two sort of most critical components to this are, on the one hand, actually being able to create a vaccine that can be licensed, and as I say, is going to be proven to be both safe and efficacious in that time frame, but also to have a massive manufacturing scale up. Typically, I'll give you just a backdrop. So in Sanofi Pasteur is one of the leaders in terms of influenza production in the United States. And so typically we'll put about maybe between 80 to 80 million doses of influenza vaccine into the marketplace in what's a very consolidated time frame. It usually starts between sort of March and goes all the way through July, and then we put those vaccines out into the marketplace August through all the way through November. We have other manufacturers who do the same thing. So typically about 200 million doses of influenza vaccine go out into the marketplace every year. it's a seasonal vaccine. With COVID-19, what we're trying to do, just as I mentioned through those partnerships I was talking about earlier, is to put hundreds of millions of doses of vaccine into the marketplace. So it's a completely different scale. And that's why you see a lot of the smaller companies and even larger manufacturers reaching out to try to gain capacity to be able to meet the demand. And as I say, provide that public health intervention to be able to, really sort of stave this this disease off as soon as we possibly can.
Thank you so much. And again, I'll leave this open to everybody. If you could each share one of your most important teachable moments from your career.
I mean, I think I'll probably go back to some of the points we've made a little bit before about challenging what you hear. I think a lot of times as you go through school and you're sort of a younger person, you kind of accept that what's out there, if it got published in a paper, it must be true, or you sort of are much more willing to sort of accept authority. That's not to say everybody feels that way, but I think as a general case, as you're growing up, you start to, you think that way, you start out that way. And so one of the moments I think I had at graduate school, I was defending my master's thesis, and one of the people on my jury actually brought up something with my research and brought up another paper. And I had made the assumption that if that had gotten published, it must be right. And therefore I sort of backed down a little bit and said, oh, well, if that was published, and that was the feedback they gave me, was you were too quick to just accept, just because that got published did not mean that it was accurate. And you could have asked, other probing questions to really get at the truth. And so, and I think, again, more and more as we see fake news and we see just different things out there that you can't, you always have to look at the source, and there's some sources more dependable than others. I would say that was a teachable moment that did have a big impact. And I do think about that a lot. Like it was a turning point for me where I thought one way before that. And then after that, I definitely challenged a lot more what I was told.
I think for me, Stephanie, when you asked the question, I don't think I had that epiphany or that one defining moment, but I think it's something that I've cultivated over my career. As a background, I've been with Sanofi for 35 years. I came right out of high school. I joined a predecessor of Sanofi, and I've been doing it every day since. And I think the one thing is that I've learned is that you have to absolutely love what you do. I think Rebecca said it earlier, or if it was Elaine, life is short, and you're in school now and you're going through school, and then at 22 or 24, when you get done with your degree or when you get done with high school or whatever it is, you're going to join the masses of people that are working. And it is absolutely critical that you get up with a passion and you love what you do. It doesn't matter what you do. Just go all in. Don't, excuse my language, don't do it half-assed, but make sure you love what you do. My wife looks at me on Sunday afternoons and I'm kind of pacing around the house, and she looks at me and she goes, "You're thinking about work tomorrow, aren't you?" And I kind of sheepishly look away and I'm kind of giggling to myself. But I love the people I work with. I respect the people I work with. They're incredibly talented people, and I know I can make a difference. And it's that reward when I came home, when I can come home and we had an emergency order that we had to get to a patient or a chemo patient that needed the medicine, and we were able to get that medicine. For me, this is what drives me every day, and I love it, and I love being part of this organization. But my advice is, whatever you do, whether it's being a mechanic or a doctor or a businesswoman or a businessman or anything, make sure you're passionate about what you do. You're going to do it pretty much for the rest of your life. Don't waste time being miserable. Enjoy it, have a great time, and just keep living it every day.
Yeah, and sorry, no, that was very inspirational, Stefan. Thank you. And just picking up off of that, I think you have epiphanies sometimes in terms of teachable moments almost after the fact, because you look back and you're like, wow, that was what I just went through was pretty interesting and I learned a lot. So the other thing I would say, just to bridge off of what Stefan was saying, is that your career path, as in life, will probably not be linear, right? It's going to change. I I studied music. I was a music major, and I wound up in sort of the intersection of business and science, and love it. And it's not that I don't love music. It's just that's what kind of wound up happening. And so you have to also, recognize that and take that into consideration in terms of, and also being easy on yourself. If you find yourself in a place where you're like, I'm not sure if this is really for me, that's okay. And because whatever you have learned, that you can take that to the next thing that you get involved in or that you think is super fascinating to you. Like for me, music, I really enjoyed playing music, but I found it sort of a little bit tough to have a career in music. But what I found is through studying classical music, for example, it's very structured and it has a lot of frameworks oriented to it. And so I took that and sort of applied that to business, because a lot of what we do in business has a lot of sort of components of frameworks around it as well. And as I say, it's just fascinating to take what you learned in a certain discipline and apply it somewhere else. So never, never, never think that what you have learned has been a waste. And also be open to the fact that, what you do in life and what you do with your career may in fact not be linear, but to Stefan's point, so long as you're passionate about so long as it's something that you really want to do and you're just loving it, that's fantastic. That's a great place to be.
Thank you so much. And I am being mindful of the time here, but I think I have one more great question here from Neha. And they want to know, it's obviously hard to go out right now and explore fields and opportunities as a high school student. So what are some ways that you could gain experience and get more information with big pharma companies like Sanofi as far as careers and different opportunities that are out there, especially while we're in this current situation?
So, I mean, I would say definitely leverage if you have any connections. Oh, my computer's about to restart. Snooze. I would say leverage any connections that you have. I in my son's Boy Scout troop, actually, one of the Scoutmaster folks, actually, his son is in college and he's thinking about careers in the biopharma world. And so we actually have set up a Zoom call, and normally I would have people come to my office and I would even give them a tour through the labs and sort of explain the different aspects of, within the company. And obviously we can't do that, like you say. Now we're in sort of that situation. I mean, I don't know how many people we have on the call, but I would definitely say if you don't have a personal connection that you can leverage, I'm more than happy to make a connection with folks and kind of share with you what the opportunities are within a company like Sanofi. I do think it's interesting. I mean, I remember back in junior high and high school, it's hard to know what you want to do because you've never experienced the different options. And to Elaine's point, I mean, it is good to kind of try something, and if you don't like it, you can move on to something else. But I think just having that, even just an idea of what that landscape even looks like before you have to make a choice would be extremely helpful. So I would say leverage any connections you have. If you don't have any and you want one, I'd be more than happy to connect with folks and kind of talk them through what I'm aware of within a company like Sanofi.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
And I would offer the same. My daughter's going through the same thing because she's just trying to figure out what she wants to do. She's thinking about potentially a career in medicine, but then she's also thinking about a career which she's really, really interested in directing, right? So it's tough because, to your point, Rebecca, she doesn't really know. She's like, how can I even understand or figure out whether this is something for me? So, some of the things that we're trying to do is connect her with to your point, people who are either in that industry or in that field. I think if you've got, if your parents have, friends or if you have family members, reach out to them. I know it sounds sort of so basic, but it really is true. If you could do anything, it's tough during COVID-19 and the shutdown, but even like a sort of a shadowing or, spending time just like sitting in and listening to somebody on a phone, what is it that you do? Some of these ideas are a little, maybe a bit off the wall, but get creative. People are sitting at home, and I mean, I know they're very busy, but they may be very open to having a conversation with you, to letting you sit in on a Zoom call. I mean, there's just get creative and be bold and try to figure some of those things out so you can really dip your toe in the water about, is this right for me? What could I do? And don't lose courage.
Thank you. And just in the interest of time, I am going to turn it back over to Kayla. Kayla?
Yes. All right. I'd like to thank Stefan, Elaine, and Rebecca for sharing so generously and openly today. I would also like to invite Christina Santos, Head of Inclusion and Diversity at Sanofi, and a member of the JANJ board to reflect. So Christina, something that really struck me today from our conversation is the compassion and the commitment that Sanofi has to the community. And we saw from Elaine and Stefan and Rebecca how they had meetings every single day. They worked with doctors and patients to ensure that they were serving the community in an effective way. We saw how different parts of the businesses all came together to make sure that they were really helping the community, and they were also putting their family members on the line. They were working in warehouses and trying to find solutions to make sure that they can get medicine out as safely and quickly as possible without sometimes the right amount of PPE. And I thought that was just so honorable and so amazing that they were doing that from everyone at Sanofi. So Sanofi's COVID-19 journey and our panelists. What are your most meaningful takeaways, especially for students?
So thank you so much, Kayla. And I love everything that JA does, and this organization is extraordinary, and the gifts that are constantly bestowed upon the teachers and students in New Jersey. So for that, I just want to, again, congratulate and thank you. And being married to a teacher and having 4 students that live in my house, what you do is very important. And thank you for just inviting me to be a part of it, Kayla. So my takeaways, I've been scribbling feverishly because although I know Elaine and Rebecca and Stefan so well, I never tire of listening to their pearls of wisdom. So my biggest takeaways today were, Elaine, those 3 questions are just pure gold. What's the right thing to do? When's the right time? And who's the most important one? And the point that the right time is now, especially given that there's so much going on right now. And Rebecca, for what I took from your there were so many things that you shared, but bridging to what Elaine said, you have to take the opportunity to challenge the status quo. And it's not just in these big things, but the example that you gave around just taking something and not challenging it with your own thesis. And we can't let those opportunities pass us by. It's in that really curious moment that you can learn a lot more and you can push people to go beyond what they've been doing. And we need that from everybody all the time, but especially from all of you as our future leaders and the folks that are going to help us save the world, right? We really, really need that. Stefan, I am always so appreciative of your prioritization of being grounded every day, being grounded in yourself, taking a moment to step back and focus and concentrate on what your priorities are, and to love what you do. This is a marathon. You spend a lot of time at work. These folks know that I feel so blessed to get to do this work. I can't believe I get paid to do this work. And because of that, it doesn't feel like work. I truly enjoy being a part of these efforts, and I never tire of it. And that is very sage advice. So those are my takeaways. And I think, too, that we have time for a photo op. Is it time for our photo op, Kayla?
Yes.
Okay, so Stephanie, you tell us when we're ready, and we will get a panel screenshot so we can capture this moment in time. So everybody at home, grab your phone and also take a selfie with all of us with the panel. Are we ready? I'm going to count to 3. So 1, oh, that's a good idea. Okay, I'm not going to take the selfie. I like that Barb's doing it. So 1, 2, 3. Yay! All right, we'll do it one more time. 1, 2, 3. All right, great. So if you plan to share on social, please use JANJ's hashtag, which is JANJ Inspiring Tomorrows. And I want to thank Kayla for a remarkable job moderating the panel. Our future is in really good hands. Extraordinarily well done, especially even just pronouncing hydroxychloroquine. I mean, and that, I know, Stephanie, that was you. Kayla, you were extraordinary. This is an option for you to moderate professionally going forward. And in closing, I want to share one of my favorite quotes, fitting for these challenging times. and it's from Maya Angelou. So this is a wonderful day. I've never seen this one before. Every day is an opportunity to do something new. So think about that. This is a wonderful day. I've never seen this one before. So with that, I will leave everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Be well, stay safe, and take care. Bye, everyone.
Bye.